Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back once again to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. It is officially week one. We are in week one mode, Carolina this week. So we got tons of content coming out. I am your host, Jackson McCurry, and joining me as always is my co-host, Anthony Jokey. Anthony, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. It's really good because today is the last Sunday without football until the middle of February. So it's a good time when the football season is right around the corner.
For sure. And it's we're recording this on Sunday afternoon. So like 1 week from now, Anthony, it'll be the fourth quarter, or it might even be the end of the game, where we'll find out if the Browns finally snap their long drought of not winning a week one game, or the streak obviously continues. But we're hopeful that streaks are meant to die. So hopefully that streak finally gets snapped come this time next Sunday.
Yeah, hopefully. There could be a lot of running in that game next Sunday, so I could imagine the game might be over by now. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. But in the meantime, we did not get to sit down and look at the 53-man roster last week just because of scheduling conflicts. Me and Alex on the last episode, which I hope you guys enjoyed the early draft content. On the previous episode, we talked briefly about some of the quarterback moves that the Browns have made. But Anthony, let's look at this 53-man roster, the way it's set now. We obviously know Sunday morning they agreed to terms to sign Joe Haig, who is a veteran offensive lineman. So the offensive line room might look a little different now. But Anthony, the way we look at this 53-man roster, like, what's your overall thoughts? Was there any surprise cuts that came to mind last week when they obviously made the final cut downs? Is the 53-man roster, you think, is it what you thought it was going to end up being? Like, your overall thoughts on everything?
I haven't compared my list to the final 53, but it was pretty close. I know we were kind of teetering back and forth on a couple things. It turned out both the Count and D'Anthony Bell both made the roster. Having only two tight ends, I think, is something we didn't expect, and also having three quarterbacks, where they picked up Kellen Mond off of waivers, and then they let go Rochelle, the defensive end. So um, it's pretty similar, I think, to what we expected. Um, having 10 offensive linemen, obviously 11 now after the signing. I'm not sure where the move is going to be made in terms of, to get Haig on the roster. But I think things are pretty close to what we expected it to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the initial 53, they still moves need to be made. I know Brad Stainbook from the Orange and Brown Report uh said on Friday afternoon they were working on a deal to bring in Jesse James, who they brought in for a visit and a workout. So there would be the third tight end if they ultimately agree to terms. I think with them signing Haig, it would mean I would have to think Drew Forbes or Froholt will be the one of the guys to let go. And because Haig can play any of the positions on the offensive line. He spent time at tackle and at guard last year in Pittsburgh. Obviously, I think them signing Haig kind of means Jack Conklin isn't fully ready yet, and Stefanski hinted at that last week in one of the couple practices they had after the 53-man roster. So obviously we know that this roster they'll continue to churn the bottom of it. So obviously there could be a couple roster changes tomorrow on Monday, obviously when they return from their extended 3-day weekend. But yeah, this is, I think, as close as we thought it was going to be. Very interested that they kept all five running backs. I think we were expecting a trade, but it didn't happen. Obviously, Felton is that hybrid. He's going to play receiver and running back as well. So uh yeah, it's very fascinating. And the whole Kellen Mond thing, I think, caught everybody off guard because that was our only player we were awarded off waiver claims. Obviously, with the Browns being 13th, they couldn't get any of the top guys that they wanted. But yeah, this 53-man roster is interesting, and it's obviously not a finished product. I would expect some roster moves in the next coming days as they prepare for Carolina.
Yeah, they're gonna have to make a couple spots. So I would tend to think, one offensive lineman. This is interesting to you that they wouldn't go with Hubbard next week instead. If Conklin isn't ready and they bring in Haig, do they? Is he maybe out the door? I don't know on that one, but obviously there's a couple spots that have to be had. You know, I would assume tomorrow we'll find out a little bit more. So I can't really maybe the one linebacker Jordan. I'm not gonna try the last name because I am terrible
I
at
think it's
last names.
Kunazik.
Gnazik,
Yeah.
maybe him, maybe one of the safeties, whether it's D'Anthony Bell or LeCount, would go. Maybe they could find a trade for one of the running backs. I don't think that happened relatively quickly. So, um, but we'll find out more within the next 24 hours in terms of who's not going to be on the roster as they have to make a couple spots.
So as it pertains to Hubbard, I think ultimately if Conklin can't go, I think he's starting. I think they just wanted to get some more insurance there by signing Haig, and he's also, like I said, he's got experience at both guard positions as well, so he gives you that versatility. Maybe they're more comfortable with him, and then they cut Froholt, and then he slides back onto the practice squad because I think they have one or two spots left. If they end up signing Jesse James, then I would think maybe a Kanadzik is the guy that gets cut. Um, a running back trade, I don't know when it'll happen. Maybe they hold on to Hunt or Dearness until the trade deadline or when an injury pops up around the league. I would just think that, they have 10 linemen now or 11 linemen. I expect one of these guys to get cut, Froholt or Drew Forbes. And then if they sign James, I would think maybe one of the linebackers because I don't think they're getting rid of the DBs. We know how much Andrew Berry values them. They went 5 corners, 5 safeties. So I don't expect one of those guys to get cut. So it'll be interesting to see who gets let go. And there's obviously the rumors that they're still looking at D tackles. Ndamukong Suh's name keeps floating around. So I would think Togiai would be the guy if they add a D tackle that he's the guy on the chopping block there. So, like I said, the bottom of the roster is going to be so fluid throughout the season. They're always turning the bottom of it. So it'll be fascinating to see what they do if these reported signings become official.
Now I did see, and you'll have to forgive me on who posted it and who wrote it, but there's an article talk about how Andrew Berry has not waived the player that he was drafted. Do you remember who wrote that? Do you remember seeing that?
I don't know who wrote that, but I do know that on Orange and Brown Talk, which is Mary Kay Cabot, Dan Lobby, they have said that he hasn't cut a draft pick yet. So it would be interesting. Like if I mentioned they signed a D tackle, do they cut Togiai? Do they cut Perion Winfrey? I don't think they're cutting Taven Bryan because he was a free agent signing and he showed flashes throughout camp. He's obviously going to be one of the starting D tackles. They're not cutting Elliott, so I feel like at some point Barry will have to say, "Hey, I need to let one of my guys go." But I mean, it is interesting that he has not cut a single draft pick yet in his going on his third year as the Browns general manager.
Yeah, it just shows how much faith he has in his draft picks, and also shows that I think he's willing to let these guys develop. Not rushing to judgment. On certain guys in terms of, all right, well, he didn't perform well his rookie season. Let's get him out of here and bring somebody else in. I think they're really willing now to, and I guess it makes sense because um, they do have really good starting players on this team on both sides of the ball. So a lot of these guys are in positions of depth. So you can let them develop. And you and I have talked about this a lot on how, you know, Pittsburgh and Baltimore have been good for so many years is that they draft these guys, they're able to stick around through the length of their rookie contracts, and by the time those are up, they're more than likely a starter on the offensive or defensive side. So um, I think the Browns roster is in such a position now um, that they're able to do that. So just letting these guys develop, letting them see 2 or 3 years in the system how they can do, and if they can begin to contribute beginning in year 3 and year 4, that's absolutely fantastic.
So you wanted to go through each position group and break down, the expectations of each position group going into the season. So let's start with the quarterback position. Obviously, it's the most important one on the team. We know Jacoby Brissett is the starter for the first 11 games while Deshaun Watson is suspended. And then Josh Dobbs, who had a fantastic preseason, so much so that, Browns fans were calling for him to be the starting quarterback, which I think is still absurd because as good as Dobbs was, he did this in preseasons over in Pittsburgh. So I think we'd all just need to step back a little bit on what we expect out of Dobbs. And then the Browns added Kellen Mond, who was a third round pick last year for the Vikings. They obviously cut ties with him after one season. It's a whole new regime up there. But you look at this quarterback room now, Anthony, it's a lot different than it's been in recent years. A lot more athleticism, a lot more speed. And I think that's something Andrew Berry wants in his quarterbacks going forward, guys that are more mobile, guys that on the play action rollouts that, if, guys aren't open, that these guys can use their legs and extend plays. And not only that, if they want to scramble and get rushing yards, they can do that as well. So I think it's a very different quarterback room from what we saw the last couple of years with Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum and even Nick Mullins for the times that he was out on the field too. It's a whole different new QB room for the Browns.
Yeah, and it's kind of followed the trend in the NFL about these quarterbacks that are a lot more mobile. You look at Josh Allen, you look at Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. These guys can roll out, run the play action, run the bootleg, and get yards if needed, beat you with their feet. Kyler Murray, Trey Lance will be that guy in San Francisco. So there's a lot of guys out there. Lamar Jackson. Obviously, I could sit here and name probably a good dozen of these guys that are able to do it. So it's no surprise that the Browns wanted to be more athletic at the quarterback position than just like a traditional pocket passer type of quarterback. In terms of expectations for this group, obviously not having Deshaun for the first 11 games of the season, uh, is tough. Obviously that whole situation played out the way it did. But with Jacoby, I don't expect a lot. I think expectations, because I know this is a playoff team, or has talent to be a playoff team, but I think expectations from at least the quarterbacks, and particularly Brissett, should be pretty uh, low to average, because I'm not expecting Brissett to go out there, throw for 50 times, and throw for 350 yards every week and 4 touchdowns. What Brissett needs to do, and then some. I want to say they mentioned that Dobbs had this package of plays as well, but what I expect Brissett to do is not turn the football over, run the play action well, um, and just can manage the game and just not turn the ball over. I think that's the biggest thing, for him. Obviously, for any quarterback, but in terms of your backup guy, you are going to have this guy out there for 11 games. So obviously, you're going to have to throw quite a bit, but be smart, make good decisions, don't turn the football over. He could get a first down or two with his legs if he needs to in certain situations. But I think this team is going to rely heavily on the running game and the play action pass for the first 11 games of the season. And uh, my expectations, at least in the quarterback room, should be pretty low to average, I would say. And I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Brissett has done a good job of not turning the ball over in his time when he's been a starting quarterback. And I think Stefanski trusts him enough to do that. There was people saying go get Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think that this front office and the coaching staff trust Brissett enough to hold the fort down the first 11 games until Watson is expected to return. But yeah, like you said, this offense, I think, is going to be like it's been the last couple of years, running the ball and trying to protect the football offensively, and hopefully giving the offense an opportunity to go down and score touchdowns. You mentioned the running room. I think it's the most loaded running back room in the NFL. You have three starting caliber backs, a rookie back who showed flashes in the preseason, and then the fifth guy who's going to be our hybrid, he can do a lot offensively, running the ball, being a receiver, and that goes well with Kareem Hunt. But it all starts and ends with Nick Chubb, who's been pretty damn good. I mean, he's top 5. You can argue he's the best back in the league, but it all starts with him in the running back room. And he's working his way up a legendary rushing chart in Browns franchise history, and he's getting ready to crack 5,000 yards. And if he has another year like he's had the first 4, he could very well be over 6,000 yards, and I think he would be in the top 3 at that point. He's right now just outside the top 5, should crack that this year, but the running back room is loaded. And when Nick Chubb's running the ball, especially in the fourth quarter, you got to know that you're either in the hunt for the win or you're securing the win when 24 is running the ball.
Yeah, this running back room, like you mentioned, is extremely talented. It's extremely deep. Uh, I very surprised they kept all 5 of these guys. I know Felton's gonna, be a hybrid guy. But this we need to rely, I think, a lot on this running back room. I'm not saying like, run Nick Chubb into the ground for the first 11 games, but you do have 5 guys to where you're able to split the load and do a good job and keep Chubb fresh for late in the game when you have to put the game away on the ground. All these guys should be able to contribute in some way. They asked a lot of Dearness Johnson last season, and he performed. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that this year. The rookie Jerome Ford showed a lot in the preseason, so I think they're going to use him quite a bit as well. So, when you talk about the offense, at least for these first 11 games, I think they're going to rely heavily on this group, especially with the receiving core not being as good, which we'll talk about next. But this running back room is very good, and if you're able to establish the run early and often, it's going to bode very well when you do eventually run the play actions that they're going to run with Brissett and later on Deshaun Watson. So I just think this running back room is very talented, and there's so many things schematically that Stefanski will be able to do with these guys to be able to continuously move the football.
So I brought it up. If Chubb meets his career average of 1,204 yards, which he's done on average the first 4 seasons, he would be 4th all time in Browns history, with only Mike Pruitt, Leroy Kelly, and Jim Brown in front of him. Now, Jim Brown obviously rushed for over 12,000 yards. Nick is just short of 5,000. I don't know if he'll ever come close to it, just because running backs don't last long in this league. But Nick Chubb is well on his way to becoming one of the best, if he's not already, one of the best backs in Browns history. And he's just shy of Kevin Mack. He's like 307 yards away, so he can get that in the first few games of the season. So it'll be something to watch for sure as he cracks the top 5. As we get to the wide receiver room, this is the room that everybody's got all eyes on this year, because they did address it in the offseason, added some new pieces in, but Browns fans, Browns reporters, they just were waiting for them to add somebody else to the room, whether it was a trade, whether it was free agency. But Andrew Berry, and obviously I think Kevin Stefanski and even wide receiver coach Chad O'Shea must feel confident in the guys they have. They added Amari Cooper in a trade right before free agency started. They drafted David Bell and Michael Woods in the 3rd and 6th rounds, respectively, in April's draft. They bring back Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz. And we mentioned Demetric Felton. He's going to play a part in the wide receiver room as well, so much so that Alex Van Pelt said that if they were going out week 1, Demetric Felton would be the slot receiver, not David Bell. So, Anthony, I think this is the biggest room of concern on the offensive side of the ball. And outside of Amari Cooper, which, we've seen what he can do in Oakland and in Dallas during his first 7 seasons in the league, expectations for this room are pretty big, because we just don't know what to expect out of it.
And see, this is tough because I kind of set the expectations low on the quarterback. So if you have low expectation quarterback and high expectations on the receivers, something has to give, right?
For sure.
Because if you're not going to be throwing the ball 50 times a game, how can you really evaluate some of these receivers? And I'm going to include Njoku in this because I think that's where they're going to line him up most of the time, because he is such a threat. I think they're going to line him out wide quite a bit, in the slot at times. So, and they're going to do a bunch of different things with him. But this group, I there's a lot of players here that have a lot to prove, and specifically Cooper and Peoples Jones. Amari, I think still wants to prove that Dallas shouldn't have traded him, and I think he's going to have a good season. I think Peoples Jones is going to have I guess you could say a bounce back season because I think he kind of went backwards a little bit last year. So, um, I think he has also a lot to prove as well going into his third season. So, and also Njoku, if I'm going to include him in that group, they gave him a large contract after franchising him. So, uh, those are three guys right there that have a lot to prove, and they've heard all the talk about the Browns need to add a receiver, the Browns need to add two receivers, and they've heard all this talk and all this chatter. I think that they're going to do a good job when given the opportunity to. I'm not sure how much opportunity they're going to have, and I'm not sure if I could set expectations high for this group. Are there certain things that I expect them to do well? Yes, like catch the football. I'm looking at you, Anthony Schwartz. Um, when thrown to. So if they don't have big drops, key drops. They hold on to the football, able to consistently convert first downs when they're thrown to and they're open. I think that's really all I can expect. I'm not going to put some ungodly expectations on these guys because you don't have your starting quarterback for the first 11 games of the season.
Yeah, that is very true. And you outside of Cooper and Peoples Jones, it's a big question mark in that room. Like David Bell's looked good, in practices and everything, and he's caught like the majority of the passes, but you can't put too many expectations on a third round wide receiver. And then we know Schwartz had a tough preseason. Woods flashed, and then he had his hamstring injury. So we really don't know what to expect out of it. So I think that's why, there's big expectations, I think, within Berea on Felton, to try to carry the load as the slot right now till Bell's eased in. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this wide receiver room performs once the season starts. You mentioned Njoku, but
Yeah.
we'll look at the tight end room briefly. Obviously, Njoku got the big payday in the offseason. And right now it's just him and Harrison Bryant. Now, we talked about Jesse James earlier, but right now there's only two tight ends. And I feel like these guys get so underlooked because all the focus is on the wide receiver position, but it's like, Njoku and Harrison Bryant are good pass catchers. All eyes are going to be on Njoku to see if that big contract is going to be worth it. But like Harrison Bryant, I think it's so underlooked. He was the best tight end in college his last year. Shown flashes the first 2 years as the third tight end, and now he gets into more of an elevated role as tight end too. And I feel like he could be a guy that breaks out this coming season.
Yeah, this is his third season with the team. So, you always look at year 2 to year 3 is typically the biggest jump. Obviously, he made a jump on the depth chart, to tight end number 2. So I think he could have a very good year. And I think with Brissett, I have to go back and look at his numbers and see how many times he targeted tight ends with where he's been. But I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him and Njoku both. with Brissett out there for these first 11 games to do some big damage. And as long as he, catches the ball and holds on to it when it's thrown to him, I think he could have a pretty good season.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking right now, actually, just because you had brought it up. His 1 year, he was the first year he was the starter in Indy. He targeted Jack Doyle 108 times. Now Doyle delivered with 80 catches for 690 and 4 touchdowns. So he does lean on the tight end quite heavily. And then I think 2019, because I remember Eric Ebron was there. And Brissett obviously took over when Luck retired, and he targeted Doyle 72 times and Eric Ebron 52. So I think Brissett looks at the tight ends, and obviously he came out of New England, where they were, very heavy tight end, with, obviously Gronk being there when Brissett was a rookie. But I think he looks at them as a security blanket. So, and obviously Ebron didn't have the most sure hands, but he did look to him and Doyle often. So I feel like Brissett, and he looked comfortable throwing to Brian and Njoku in that final preseason game. So I think Brissett is going to rely on Njoku and Bryant big time during the time he's the starting quarterback.
Yeah, and you look at that chart there. You have up to one thing that catches my eye: yards per reception for both those guys. Jack Doyle for that season 10.4, Eric Ebron 12.1. So, that's pretty good. That's obviously a first down every time. So, um, if Njoku and Brian are able to get open and catch the football, I expect quite a bit of damage to be done by the tight ends this year.
Without a doubt. As we get to the offensive line group, this has been a strong suit of the Browns the last couple of years, obviously with Bill Callahan guiding them as their position coach. But there's some change, obviously, this year. J.C. Treader was released and ultimately ended up retiring. So all eyes were on Nick Harris. And then, unfortunately, second play of the preseason, he goes down with a knee injury. He goes out. They lose their other rookie center, Dawson Deaton, to a knee injury immediately following that game in Jacksonville in practice. But when you look at this offensive line, 4 out of the 5 parts are back. Wills, Batonio, Teller, and Conklin. Ethan Posick now slides in as the center. He was with Seattle the last few years. Jack Conklin's not even back 100% yet, as he's recovering from the patella injury. So I think this is a group we shouldn't worry about, but there is some worry at the beginning of the year because Posick, new center, obviously he's got the timing, I think, down with Brissett because they were on the second team offense for the majority of the offseason. So I think they had their timing down, but Posick did not grade out well in his time in Seattle. And then obviously right tackle is something to watch. And I think left tackle is as well, because this is a big year for Jedrick Wells, his 3rd year. Next year, obviously he's extension eligible, but those tackle spots are going to be something to watch just because of the uncertainty on the left side with how Wills rebounds from an injury plagued year last year, and then Conklin coming back off the injury.
Yeah, and despite the injuries, they've played well. So
Yes.
I think that bodes very well for the offensive line. So, as long as they can stay healthy for the majority of the year, um, I think you expect, some injuries with offensive linemen just because of the grueling nature of their position and what they have to do every week. But as long as they can stay healthy for the most part, the depth behind them is very good as well. So, if one of these guys do have to miss a game, they have proven that they could just, plug somebody in. And, when you have strong players surrounding the replacement on the O line, it can still be effective. So, I think the O line is very good. And I think you're right where we don't have to worry too much. I am intrigued by Pochik and what he's able to do, stepping in as a starter. I know he came over here to be the backup, but injuries do happen, so he'll be starting this season. Um, you talked about Wills. I think this is a very key year for him, like you mentioned. He is entering his 3rd season. If he has like another average year or another injury plagued year, you kind of have to maybe start thinking about down the road. Do I really want to sign this guy long term? Do I want to extend him? Do I need to find a replacement? So maybe you can find a replacement for left tackle, and you can move Wills back to the right tackle. Because I believe Conklin's deal's up after this year, right?
Yes.
So that could also be on the table as well. Um, so there's I think very few questions for this offensive line, um, be albeit they are important ones. But I think this O line is very solid, and there isn't a whole lot that you have to worry about.
No, I mean ultimately I'm not too worried because I just think it the health will be the biggest thing, obviously for Conklin and Wills, just because he's had his ankle injuries the first couple years. But when they're all out there together, this is obviously one of, if not the best offensive lines in the league. So health is a big concern, but I'm not too worried about the group overall. As we slide over to the defensive side of the ball, we'll just talk about the defensive line as a whole. Obviously, Myles Garrett's there. Jadeveon Clowney's back. They added some depth behind them in the draft and through trades. But Anthony, I think all eyes are on the defensive tackle group. And this has been a group that I think since we've started this podcast has always been a position group of concern. Obviously, Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan are the first guys to get a crack at it. They had good spurts in the preseason, but I think the group as a whole is something to watch. They got Togiai and Winfrey backing them up. They're obviously still looking at defensive tackles to potentially bring in. But when you look at the defensive line, I think those guys, those four in the middle, are going to be the ones to watch. Obviously, Garrett and Clowney have the ability to kick inside in certain packages, but they never really did it a lot last year, if at all. If they're going to be a stout defense, it starts up front. And the way that opposing teams in the preseason, now it was just preseason, the way they were gashing them in the run, definitely gives me a cause for concern heading into the regular season.
Yeah, yeah, it does. But if you look at the four guys that they have there, Elliott, Togiai, Bryan, and Winfrey, three of those have been drafted in the last 3 years. Elliott in 2020, Togiai in 21, and Perrion Winfrey this year. So they have invested the draft picks, in this group in an attempt to solidify that position. Now Elliott's going into his third season, and as we mentioned before, with Wills and Peoples Jones, with it and Harrison Bryant too. With it being their third season, you expect hopefully a big jump in terms of talent and being able to play well. So, and also being in the system for 3 years as well. So, I think that hopefully you can start to see with at least Jordan Elliott that he's able to do well in this position this year. Toby, I hardly saw the active roster last season. I think he was inactive for almost every single game last year. So, obviously being able to be active and get some playing time is going to be crucial for him. I don't have high expectations for this group just because I don't think they're going to perform well. But I think that these guys can maybe start to maybe turn some heads, and as long as they improve from week 1 to week 18. Is it 18 now? Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they can improve every week, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, if they can develop and improve week to week, then it's not a reason for concern. But I still think it's just very risky going in with this group right now. Do they bring in somebody this week? We'll see. I know a lot of people want Ndamukong Suh. Some people want Sheldon Richardson back. So will be interesting to see what they do with this group going forward. There's obviously a lot of youth. Taven Bryant was up and down in Jacksonville. We'll see what he can bring on a 1-year deal. But hopefully, Jordan Elliott finally shows some promise going into his third season. Obviously, it's a big year for him as well. Looking at the linebacker group, this is a group I feel pretty good about going into 2022. JOK showed the glimpses of superstardom last year. Anthony Walker was a great addition, and they brought him back on another 1-year deal. Jacob Phillips, I think, is a guy to watch that I think could break out, or this could be it for him. He's been injury plagued the first couple seasons. Sione Takitaki's in a contract year, so obviously he's going to probably go all out trying to get a payday, if whether it's from the Browns, which is probably unlikely, or from another team. And then Tony Fields, guy that was drafted last year, people call him JOK Light. Showed flashes in the preseason. But Anthony, this group's got a lot of depth, and I think there's a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism in this room. You got to feel really good about the defense as you go backwards. Not saying the guys up front aren't talented, but when you go to the linebacker room, and then obviously the secondary that we'll get to, a lot of speed and athleticism, and a lot of hope in the linebacking room.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of the linebacker play revolves around the defensive lineman when it comes to filling and making sure you get in your correct gap. So if the defensive tackles aren't doing their job and getting in the right gap, it makes it tougher for linebackers. But when you do look at this linebacker group as a whole, it's very good. What's nice, I guess, is with the Browns playing uh, more so than not, five defensive backs in a nickel. You really only need a couple linebackers out there at a time. Obviously there's certain situations where you'll probably have three guys or even four out there, but um, this linebacker group is very good. You have, budding superstar like you mentioned with JOK. Some of these other guys, I would like to see more, obviously from Taki and Phillips this year. Just Phillips being on the field, I think, all the stuff he's talked about this offseason and in the training camp about, being ready and really itching to get at it. I'm curious to see how he performs this year. This linebacker group is very versatile. As well, being able to have some speed and help cover some of the tight ends. So, with them being versatile, it makes things easier for Joe Woods, to keep the best guys out there, the best 11 guys out there. I have pretty, I guess we said low expectation, or at least I did for like the quarterbacks and the receivers. I think with the linebackers and the secondary and I guess the defensive ends, everything but the D tackles. I guess I have pretty high expectations on the defensive side of the ball this year.
Yeah, I do as well. I think this has got the components to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 defense this year. And the continuity is a great thing too. Having Joe Woods back for another season, and keeping most of the talent on that side of the ball back as well. I think that bodes well, especially the way they played at the end of the year. The secondary, I think it's the deepest outside of the running back room. It's the deepest part of the roster, in my opinion, at least. They kept 5 corners, 5 safeties. The corners, obviously, Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome, a solid 1-2 punch. Greedy Williams, AJ Green, and MJ Emerson provide great depth at the position. We saw great play out of them in the preseason. And then the safety room, John Johnson III had a strong second half after he struggled throughout the first half of the year last year. Grant Delpit, I think we're finally going to get to see him at 100% after him coming back off the Achilles injury last year. It showed some flashes of the potential that was there when they drafted him in 2020. Ronnie Harrison's back on a 1-year deal. Richard LeCounte's entering his second season, and then DeAnthony Bell, who just made play after play in the preseason. I think a lot of people were shocked that they kept 5 safeties, but I think the way Bell played in the preseason, you could not afford to try to get him on the practice squad because I think he would have gotten picked up by another team.
Oh, most definitely. He's definitely one player that would have been claimed, if that was the case. Yeah, the secondary is very talented. Obviously you have Denzel Ward, who just got that big contract extension. You have Greg Newsome, who had a really good rookie season last year. Greedy Williams is in the last year of his deal. He probably won't get paid by the Browns, but I have high expectations for him this year. AJ Green has certainly shown some flashes, and Emerson in the preseason, played well as well. So, this defensive secondary is extremely talented, and when you have a pass-heavy league like the NFL is, you need to have a lot of good corners, and you need to have 3, 4 guys, if not more, that you could continuously rotate in there, so you can keep, the Denzel Wards and Greg Newsome's fresh. Um, so they have that on this roster. The safeties. I was happy to see that John Johnson played well in the second half of last season, because we were talking about for a little bit. If the Browns maybe regretted giving him that contract, but that second half, I think he certainly earned it, and hopefully he could continue to build on that momentum. Going into this season. So. Um, I hopefully Delpit could go to another level this year. It's also his third season. That 2020 draft class. Uh, I think we expect quite a bit from this season, with it being their third year. So, he's another guy who needs to be on the field, be available. Obviously, he lost his whole rookie season, but these two safeties can do a very good job. And the back end of this Browns defense, and obviously the two pass rush that they have are very good. It's just the two guys in the middle on the defensive front is really where your worry is. So I have no doubt that this team will be able to keep the major passing attacks at bay. But it's the running game going that you go up against. I think is their biggest concern, and will be their biggest challenge this year. If they're able to uh, do a decent job and maybe be just average in terms of run defense, I expect their passing defense to probably be in the top third of the league. So if they could just be average in the run defense, this defense will be very good, and will go a long way in terms of helping the Browns make the playoffs this year.
Without a doubt. Real quick on the specialist room, they upgraded it in the offseason. Obviously, they moved on from Jamie Gillen last year at punter, and this offseason they brought in Corey Bjorkwez, who's been pretty solid, whether it was Green Bay or Buffalo. But kicker, I think, was the biggest thing. They've been looking for that long-term replacement for Phil Dawson for the last decade, and they finally did it, to the shock of everybody, in the fourth round when they selected Cade York out of LSU. He has been fantastic. He was voted top rookie by the media. This guy, when he's hitting 70-yard field goals in warmups and consistently booming it over 65 yards in practice at Berea, that just tells you he's been great. Like he missed a couple kicks in preseason, but sometimes that wind at First Energy Stadium can be tricky to figure out. But this guy's been great, and it feels like Anthony. Now we'll see as the weather turns here in Northeast Ohio. But because I was saying this last year about Chase McLaughlin, but York seems like he's the guy to finally find a long-term replacement at kicker. But you have to feel really good about it going into the regular season.
Yeah, I think so. Which is nice, because the last however many years it's been a big question. Punting not so much, but obviously just the regular field goal kicking and extra points, have been a question. So I think it's a big year not only for these two guys, but also Mike Prefer. We talked about this a little bit as well. Just the special teams unit as a whole. I think we there are high expectations that these specialists will do a much better job, and that includes kickoff coverage, punt return, kickoff return as well. Although you don't get too many of those anymore with how the rules are, but I think there's big expectations, and rightfully so, and hopefully the improvements can be made from the last couple years to this year. All those areas are able to be much better than what they were.
Without a doubt. And I mean, I'll mention it just because, but the legend, Charlie Hewlett, once again back as the long snapper. And there's not too much worries about that because he's been holding it down for like the last 7 seasons. And I don't expect anything to change in that department.
No, No, but it's funny you mentioned him. In my Manor franchise, he retired after the season, so hopefully he has a couple more seasons in him.
I would think so. I mean, I've seen long snappers play into their 40s, so Hewlett, I think, is going to have a long, lengthy career as long as he keeps it up with the Browns. We wanted to do something here at the end of the episode after we did the roster breakdown and everything. We're gonna play a little over and under. I sent these to Anthony, so we're gonna go over them. Anthony, let's start with Jacoby Brissett. And I based these off of their career averages, and with him, he was a starter for 2 years, so I'm basing it off his career averages in those 2 seasons as the starter. It is 11 games, but Anthony, over or under 3,000 passing yards for Jacoby Brissett this year?
I think the running game is going to be a huge focus, so I'm going to go under. But I will say I think the completion percentage is going to be high. I know you don't have that, but I think the completion percentage will be high.
Okay. I'm gonna say under as well, just because, like you, it's 11 games. He would have to be close to 300 passing yards a game, and I just don't see that happening with how I think the offense is going to go. So I'm gonna take under as well. Uh, his 2 seasons as the Colts starter, the first year he had 13 touchdown passes, the second year was 18, so the average is 15 and a half. Over or under 15 and a half touchdown passes for Jacoby Brissett?
Well, I will use the same reasoning and also take the under on this one.
I'm actually going to take the over on this one because, we have, Kareem Hunt, we have Amari Cooper, David Njoku. You might even see a screen out of Nick Chubb or maybe a Demetric Felton. So I'm going to say over. I think 16 touchdowns in 11 games is definitely formidable for him. I really hope so, because if he doesn't have as many passing touchdowns, I think major questions might be in play about him and maybe the way that they attack the passing game, especially because we do have some weapons in that effect. Nick Chubb, he's average, like I mentioned earlier, he's averaged a little over 1,200 rushing yards per season so far in his NFL career. Anthony, does he go over or under 1,200 rushing yards this year?
I will definitely take the over in this one.
I will as well. And he's got 36 rushing touchdowns in his first 4 seasons. So that would be 9 touchdowns per season. Does he go over or under on 9 rushing touchdowns, Anthony?
I'll say he finally at least gets to 10 this season.
I would think so as well. Despite how talented the running back room is, I think he finally he's hit double-digit touchdowns a couple times, but I do think he hits it this year as well. Amari Cooper. Now we're going to get to 1,000 receiving yards, over or under. He's averaging just a little over during his 7 seasons in the league.
This is tough because I took the under for Brissett in terms of under 3,000 passing yards, but I think Cooper will be over 1,000. He'll be the second main target, and he'll have over 1,000 yards this year.
I think so as well, especially once Watson gets back. I think him and Cooper had a good connection in camp and throughout the offseason, so I would expect that to be really formidable once Watson gets back on the field. 6.5 receiving touchdowns, over or under?
You sure it's not CDs?
Ha ha ha.
I just poking fun at the
No, I
Jack's
know.
type here.
Yeah.
In our notes, but I'll actually go over on this one. I like I said, I think within the Joku, who'll be the primary target. I think he'll get to at least 7 touchdowns.
Yeah, this one will be interesting because his career high, and it's been in 2 of the last 3 seasons with the Cowboys, was 8. I would think I'm going to say over, but it would not. It's going to be close. I just think he's gotten 6 a couple times, 7 a couple times, and 8 a couple times. So it's going to be really close, and 5 a couple times. So yeah, it's going to be really close. So I'll say over, but it won't be by much. And then he's averaging around 73, 74 receptions per year. So Anthony, do you think he goes over that amount?
This is a tough call. I'll say he goes over
Yeah,
the number.
I'll say under. I just think there's not I think they'll spread the ball around with the number of weapons in this department. So I would say he goes under 74 receptions this year. he's going to get heavily targeted, which he has been throughout his career, but I just don't think he hits that amount. Kareem Hunt, we expected him to be on this team. There's no sense that he's going to get traded anytime soon, based on all reports. He averages about 1,000 all-purpose yards per year because he's such a threat running the ball and receiving as well. So Anthony, over under Kareem Hunt, 1,000 all-purpose yards.
I think I'm going to take the under just due to the fact that the running back room is so loaded that I think they're going to spread the workload a lot more this year.
Yeah, I would think so as well, just because of how talented that running back room is. I don't know what. I mean, he's going to be, I think, a big part in the passing game, but just because of the running room, I think he just misses 1,000 all-purpose yards. How about 9 all-purpose touchdowns, over or under?
I'll, for the same reason, I think you know what, push.
Okay,
He'll,
so
he'll get 9.
9 is a good number. Okay, yeah. I say over. I think he hits double-digit touchdowns as well, just because of what he does in the receiving game. I think he does go over. Myles Garrett, 58.5 sacks throughout his career, so that averages pretty close to about 12 per year. Over or under this year, Anthony, for Myles Garrett, 12 sacks.
Over, and he'll get to at least 15.
Yeah, I got a bold prediction this year. 20 sacks for Myles Garrett. I think that's gonna happen this year. I think he's gonna be heavily motivated to finally silence some of the naysayers about him. That he doesn't show up in big games, that he can't get defensive player of the year. I think this is a big year for Myles, and I think he finally answers the bell and has a monster year, maybe even wins defensive player of the year. 23 QB hits per season. It's about the average. Over or under on that department.
I will say over, and he'll probably have at least 10 in the 2 games against Pittsburgh combined. At least 10,
I thought
just
you're gonna
because of that offensive line.
I thought you were gonna say he's gonna have 10 in week 1 against Baker, but yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, that could be a possibility too. To be completely honest.
His career high in this, according to Pro Football Reference, is 33, which was last year. And this is the first year he played. Well, second year he played in every game in a season. Yeah, I'm obviously, if I think he's going to hit 20 sacks, I think he's going to be well over 23 QB hits. So give me the over in that as well. We go to Denzel Ward, who doesn't have a knack to get the interceptions. He has 10 in his career, so that's about, I'd say 2. So that's why I put the over under at 2.5.
Well, it's because they don't throw his way.
This
And
is true.
that's a smart thing. I'll say I'll take the over. Actually, I think he'll probably get 3. He'll tie his career high. I don't know if he'll get more than that, but it's hard because they just don't throw his way.
Right. I'm going to take over as well. I think he's out to prove a lot of things now with the new contract. And the fact that a lot of corners got ranked over him in the top 100. Granted, it was by his peers, but I think he's probably out to prove a lot this year, much like Myles is as well. So I'm going to take the over. I say he gets 4 interceptions this year. That's my prediction. And he's got 50 pass deflections in his career, which is 12.5. So over under 12.5 pass breakups, Anthony.
I'll also take the over on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been very consistent in the double-digit category in that mark. So I think he gets that. And our last over and under, Vegas has the Browns at 9.5 wins, even I think after the Watson suspension. So Anthony, over under 9.5 wins for the Browns this year. We won't give our official prediction yet, but I go over or under.
This is a tough spot. Under.
Yeah, I keep doing the schedule in my mind, and I want to go under, but at the same time, I believe in this defense. So I feel like this defense is going to win us some games that people didn't expect us to win. I still keep having us winning double-digit games somehow, so I got to take the over. I just think the Browns are going to win at least 10 games, which is crazy because people are like, well, Jacoby Brissett's not that good. In the middle of the season, the schedule's tough, but I don't know. I believe in the defense. I believe in the offensive weapons around Brissett, but I think they can win a lot more games than people expect. So I'm taking the over right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I think I'm at like 9-8, so that would be under at the moment.
That's fair. That's fair. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out, obviously, but it's definitely going to be an interesting season to say the least for the Cleveland Browns. It always is. So that's not a real big bold
Well,
prediction on
that
my part.
yeah, I was gonna say it's been interesting for the last 23 years. So since they came back.
Yeah, and this year's probably should be no different. It already has been a wild 2022 for the Browns in general, so this season should be no different. Anthony, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up here?
I don't think so. I think it's just a fun and exciting time, and we'll have a game to talk about later on this week, which will be very very interesting with who the opponent is.
Oh yeah, it's already been interesting last week. You know, some comments, some merchandise already tells you that this is going to be a interesting week, to say the least. And we'll be back later this week to cover
I
all that.
I do
Oh,
have an idea though.
uh-oh.
Can we use the tagline from his shirt for a new segment on the show called "Off the Leash"?
Is this where the gloves come off, Anthony, and you start ranting?
Either one of us.
Uh,
Do we just kind of get something like off our chest? Maybe we could do that.
we could do that. We we'll discuss it a little more off the
Okay.
air, but I
Yeah,
like the idea.
yeah, we'll have to do something like that, I think.
For sure. But we will be back later this week. We got some more content that we're going to put out to get you guys ready for Browns versus Panthers. In the meantime, you guys can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Jokey. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack McCurry08. Check out the Dogland wherever you guys get your podcasts. If you're not subscribed already, please do so. Leave us a review, share with your fellow Browns fans, and follow us at the Dogland on social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook. And until next time, Browns fans, as we get on out of here, have a great one and go Browns.